But going back to what I said, years ago, it was about 8 years ago, I was placed into a mental institution for going through my process of repentance and being able to hear the voice of God. And so I understand the brokenness of who people think are insane or mad. Now, depending on the case and depending on the person, the severity of it varies. But brokenness is brokenness. And a lot of times when you are in an intractable conflict in an area, you are broken in that area. And so if you do not have assistance in that area, you might not make it. Because I have an understanding of who Christ is and then who I am able to continuously heal myself and strengthen myself. But again, I suffered for that. I paid the price for that. And on a consistent basis, the Lord allows people to break me over and over again until His strength has to kick in, because they've broken me down to a weakness. And then they wonder why they cannot get close to me. They wonder why they cannot talk to me. They wonder why. And I'm not the only one. It's that everybody doesn't have a relationship with Christ enough for His strength to kick in their weakness. And so a lot of times when my soul is broken, when I'm brokenhearted and crushed in spirit, and the Lord has to come close, He then stands up on the inside of me and He handles the situation. You see me, but it is Christ in me that continues forward. I've been so beaten down and broken and crushed by this world, the people of this world, the powers, everything that happens and goes on. I've been so bruised and beaten down that I can't go forward anymore. A lot of times who you see speaking, that's who you see speaking. I checked out. But I'm still able to move forward because His strength is working in me. But when you see those people and they're broken down and they're knocking their head against the padded walls and they are not speaking and they're not talking, they're still in there. I just want you to know that. I want you to understand that I've been so broken before that I had no strength to speak, to get up. If you said something to me, I might just turn my head this way. I heard what you said. I comprehended what you said. I was in there. But I'm so broken. When I was 12 years old, I flew off a scooter and landed on my wrist in the wrong way and fractured it. Overnight, it swelled up and I couldn't move it. I ended up having to go to the hospital. They put a cast on it, but it started growing the wrong way. It was fractured at first, but then they had to break it, put on a tighter cast, and let it heal. But when that happened, I couldn't move it. When it was fractured, I couldn't move it without any pain. But when it was broken, I couldn't move it. When a person is broken, they cannot move. So a lot of times when people are like, oh, they're crazy, they're acting out. I say this a lot. Before you call somebody crazy or before you say something about a person, you need to check the timeline of their life. If they've had extreme devastations happen to them within a short amount of time, they could possibly be broken. If you take your phone and you bash it repeatedly on different occasions, sometimes your camera might not work because there was consistent trauma to your phone that caused the camera to break. It's the same thing with people. You cannot continuously break a person and then call them crazy. So you have to look at the person's life and see what happened to them in a month's time. What happened to them in a week's time? Sometimes what happened to them in one day? Did they have a series of traumatic events in a matter of hours? That could break a person. Did they have a series of traumatic events in a week span? That could break a person. Did they have a series of traumatic events happen in a month's time? That can break a person. Have they had consistent series of traumatic events over a span of years? That can break a person. But people will sit and call them crazy, not knowing what they have gone through. And then it becomes an intractable conflict because you cannot get out with a resolution. Every attempt for you to resolve it and for it to get mediated gets defeated. And so, as I said before, I understand the broken person. I know what it feels like to be brokenhearted and crushed in spirit to the point that I cannot move. A lot of times when people go through breakups, they stay in the bed. They cannot move. Like I said, there are different severities to that. When people lose relationships, sometimes they cannot move. They have to heal. When my wrist got fractured and had to get rebroken, it had to heal. But it had to stay in a cast. It could not be moved. I told you before, I was at a place where I could not get up off the floor. I was so broken at one point. When I was living with my parents, my mom walked into my room, and I always answer my parents. I just have always, they don't play that type of stuff. But I had gone through so much stuff that I ignored her. She walked in my room and she called my name. I was sitting on the floor and I couldn't handle not another thing. She opened the door and she said something to me and I did not move. My intellect was still intact. My common sense was still intact. But you get to a point where you don't care anymore. Everything that you have been taught throughout your life that teaches you common sense, common courtesy, respect, all of that goes out of the window when you're broken. You don't care about certain things because you're broken. You are the one that needs the help. Everything else doesn't matter. A person's rank doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if the president walked in the room. If you're broken to a certain extent, you just can't move. So, I said all this to say and set up the understanding of what it has been like in my own intractable conflict dealing with my finances. And I'm getting ready to give you some story times that can prove as an example of what I'm talking about. And the first story time that I'm going to give you is my experience with being hired at the Cheesecake Factory in Alpharetta, North Point Mall.